Welcome to the first ever EvalVoices webinar presented by the European Commission, DG INPA, DG ENIS, MENA, and FPI. And thank you very much for joining us today from across the globe. And with your participation, we understand that most of you are engaged with evaluation somehow, either as evaluation commissioners, evaluation managers, or simply the users of evaluation, or somebody with some sort of stake in evaluation. And with this, we understand that status of evaluation work depends on how it is actually perceived. Is it truly rigorous, and is it being taken seriously by everybody? Can the profession stand alongside other scientific disciplines such as implementation science, such as behavioral science? And these are some of the questions that we are exploring today. And we are very honored and privileged to begin this EvalVoices initiative with Dr. Michael Quinn Patton, who is one of the most published, renowned, and authentic evaluators of our time. And he has proven this with a lot of publications he have, and also being the founding board member of the International Evaluation Academy, that where he worked alongside other people to make a compelling case for recognizing evaluation as science, mainly to strengthen the profession's credibility and its policy influence, and place it in dialogues with other fields, and also to prevent it from being dismissed as anecdotal or political, so that evaluation findings are not just seen as opinions, but rather credible evidence by all. So with this, I'll hand it over to you, Jean-Hervé, to formally welcome everybody, introduce EvalVoices and today's webinar.
Thank you, Hu. So good afternoon to all. So I'm in charge of doing some welcoming remarks, and after this not only beautiful but also very relevant song, I hope I will be up to the task. So welcome to this EvalVoices. So this is a space for evaluators by evaluators. It is a platform grounded in the EU commitment to an evaluation first culture, as this is highlighted, among other things, by the EU Development Cooperation Evaluation Policy, the Evaluation Matters document, and also by the European Commission Better Regulation Guidelines. These are our two main documents. So the EvalVoice initiative brings together evaluation professionals and thought leaders to explore what works in evaluation and also what doesn't work and under which circumstances, while sharing cutting-edge tools, methods, and approaches that shape relevant, context-sensitive, inclusive, and successful evaluation practices. So launched by the European Commission, exactly by DG INPA, DG ENEST, DG MENA, and FPI, EvalVoices builds on successful initiatives such as Eval Crisis in last 2020, or evaluation in hard-to-reach areas the year before, in 2019. So it serves both EC staff, European Commission staff, sorry, including evaluation managers and monitoring and evaluation focal points that are mostly in EU delegations, and the broader evaluation community. So now we are truly honored to open this webinar series with Michael Quinn Patton. We could not have found a better speaker to kick off the EvalVoices initiative. So Michael, as already mentioned shortly by Gur, needs no introduction. He is a widely published author and has struck a mark with numerous of his books, including, among others, Blue Marble Evaluation, Developmental Evaluation, and Utilization-Focused Evaluation, to name only a few. He has led evaluation at all levels across diverse sectors, including education, health, environment, but also in the more general sector of development cooperation. He has served as president of the American Evaluation Association and was also the founding board member of the International Evaluation Academy. So his 2018 article on evaluation science resulted in the creation of this International Evaluation Academy and stands as an important contribution to the debate on evaluation conduct, as well as the role of evidence in evaluations and decision-making. So this being said, it is a real privilege to have him with us today to talk about more evaluation science. And over to you, Michael, for this first EvalVoice webinar. Thank you very much.
Greetings, everyone. I am delighted and honored to help initiate this important series on EvalVoices for evaluators and by evaluators. I've been doing this work for some 55 years, and as an old man, this is what I've learned about old age. It's like climbing a mountain. You get out of breath and tired, but the view looking back can be spectacular. So I'm going to look back with you a little bit. That's what we old folks do, to help you understand how we got from there to here around the issue of how we identify ourselves, both individually and collectively. It turns out to be a challenging process with quite some history. We all have multiple identities, and so as we think about how we describe ourselves and our different identities and commitments interrelate, I want to invite you all, as I share my journey, to think about how you present yourself and what the options are. And I'm inviting you today to include in your identity being an evaluation scientist, or if you're someone who uses evaluation, looking to use evaluation as a science. We've had a proliferation of evaluation approaches. I did a video listing over 101 and stopped counting at that point. So there are lots of ways we identify ourselves as an independent evaluator, a quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods evaluator, participatory evaluator, realist evaluator, culture responsive evaluator, equity focused evaluator, development evaluator, empowerment evaluator, impact evaluator, MEL, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, evaluation consultant. You could be a practitioner, methodologist, theorist, consultant, or trainer. Lots of ways of thinking about who we are. I began as an applied sociologist with a specialization in organizational development. When I did work for the Agricultural Extension, they called me a rural sociologist. When I did my first development evaluation, they called me a sociologist of development. For a while, I was a sociological evaluator, but people were more confused about what sociologists do than what evaluators do. So it was better to just drop the sociology piece and be an evaluator. That was confusing enough. In 1978, when the first edition of utilization-focused evaluation came out, it became one of the debate topics at the annual conferences of the American Evaluation Association. Michael Scriven and I, while the paradigm debates were going on, also debated use. Scriven believed that evaluation and evaluators had the responsibility to judge merit or worth, make those judgments, hand them to decision makers, but what they did with them was not the evaluator's problem. I took the opposite view, that how we did our work and its use was important to the profession, and that we ought to facilitate evaluations in a way to get use. And after one of our debates, we shared a taxi back to the airport, and I said to Michael, you know, your definition of evaluation has become dominant, that evaluation and evaluators are judges. So I'm going to yield to you, and instead of calling myself an evaluator, suppose I call myself an evaluation facilitator. He said, that sounds more accurate to me. Then he looked at me with a twinkle in his eye and said, but I think you'd been a hell of an evaluator if you're willing to do the job. So I became an evaluation facilitator. When I was president of AEA, the membership application at that time asked for your background discipline economics, education, sociology, psychology, but it didn't include an option to be an evaluator. And so one of the breakthroughs was to actually add evaluator as an identity to apply to the American Evaluation Association. And now over half of the people who do join consider evaluation as their primary identity. As mentioned, when I did the developmental evaluation book, I became a developmental evaluator, then I became a principles-focused evaluator, then I became a Blue Marble evaluator. My daughter joined me in this work. She's a second-generation evaluator and was co-author of the latest edition of utilization-focused evaluation, which made me an intergenerational evaluator. And so now, when I think about where I'm located, utilization-focused is at the center of all that. I would describe myself, and I'm inviting you to think about how you describe yourselves, as a utilization-focused, intergenerational, principles and learning-driven, developmental, Blue Marble, evaluation facilitating scientist. That's my current identity. And what we're going to discuss today is that last part, the science part. Where does that come from? What does that mean? What kind of evaluator are you? Try on various notions. This is a cartoon from our resident cartoonist in evaluation, Chris Lisi, who has a young man saying, I'm a theoretical evaluator. And she asked, meaning you develop evaluation theory, or you just consider yourself an evaluator in theory? And he says, the second one. So, evaluation scientists. As I talk, think about trying on this language. I am an evaluation scientist. This came about in 2016 when Donald Trump was elected president and was already attacking science. Now he's dismantling it in this administration. But on April 22nd, 3 months after his inauguration in 2017, millions of people marched for science in 600 cities around the world. The American Evaluation Association was one of 270 partner organizations that supported the March for Science. I participated in it in Washington, D.C. with my son, Brandon, and his wife, who's a cell biologist. And in the course of that march, over 4 hours, you meet people. Here we are, it was a rainy day. You meet people and they ask you, what's your connection to science? And over the course of those 4 hours, for the first time in my life, I found myself describing myself as an evaluation scientist and developed an elevator speech. When they would say, so what's your connection to scientists? And I'd say, I'm an evaluation scientist. And they'd say, what's that? And I'd say, well, science is systematic inquiry into how the world works and why. Evaluation science is systematic inquiry into how, whether, and why interventions to change the world work. Evaluation science is systematic inquiry into how, whether, and why interventions to change the world work. And then I noticed that all of these new fields that were emerging were all calling themselves sciences. Her referred to this earlier in the beginning. Implementation science, translational science, policy science, action science, big data science, complexity science, sustainability science, AI science, decision science, cognitive science, strategy science, brain science, scaling science, communication science, network science. We were the only ones not calling ourselves a science. We got stuck in this sort of administrative management silo, and everybody else was identifying themselves as a science. And what I've come to believe and assert is that all of those specializations are forms of evaluation science. Evaluation science is the umbrella for all of these other emergent ways of going about inquiring into how the world has changed and how to make it work. So, I am an evaluation scientist. Nobel Prize is one of the ways of honoring scientists. And in 2012, the Nobel Economics Prize for matching theory was to economists, Roth and Shapley, for their work in matching theory. How to pair doctors with hospitals, students with schools, kidneys with transplant patients, people getting married, any kind of matching of people. And so the question becomes, when it is useful and appropriate to position what we do as evaluation science and ourselves as evaluation scientists. Now, clearly not all of evaluation is science, but a part of it is, and recognizing that is what we're talking about today. Evaluation has many different identities. If we think about it as a kaleidoscope, depending on how you look at it, we get a different thing. We get a different look at what evaluation may be. So, for example, it's a profession. And we've got, as a profession, we have associations worldwide, guiding principles and standards, journals, conferences, training and professional development, essential competencies. There's debate about how much we're a profession, but clearly we have the basic elements of being a profession. We're in applied social science, one of the main textbooks in evaluation, from Peter Rossi, who is a sociologist, treats evaluation as applied social science with emphasis on methods and technology. We're in the management and administration accountability cycle. This is the interstate highway bridge that connects Minneapolis and St. Paul. I'm coming to you from Minnesota in the north central part of the United States. And on August 1st, 2007, that freeway bridge collapsed. There was an investigation, and it turns out that there had been a inspection of the bridge a few months earlier. The bridge was found to be dangerously flawed, recommended redoing the bridge, and yet nothing was done, and it collapsed. 13 people died. This is the main artery that connects the eastern and western parts of the United States. So we need accountability forms of evaluation. And we're become a disciplinary body of knowledge. When we started out, we thought it was all going to be about how to do evaluations. But over the course of these 50 years, we've learned about effectiveness. We've learned about how to design programs and what constitutes qualities of effective programs. We've become a discipline as well as a profession. So we have all of these different elements, and adding to that is the perspective of evaluation science. Now, I would remind you, and Herb mentioned this in his introduction, that we're talking about how things are perceived. What is perceived as real is real in its consequences, the basis of the Thomas theorem in sociology. And so if we perceive ourselves as evaluation scientists, that is the beginning point for others perceiving us that way. We're talking about how we make sense of that for ourselves and for others. So I'm going to quickly share 4 stances for evaluation as a science. The definitional stance, that some of what we do is science. The inquiry stance, that evaluative thinking is scientific thinking and vice versa. That the body of knowledge stance, that what we know constitutes a body of scientific evidence. And the political stance, that it is in our interest and indeed in the world's interest to make common cause with other scientists in support of science. So science as an identifiable realm of inquiry is relatively recent. The name was invented in 1833 by the Reverend William Wethwell, who was doing a book on the history of inductive sciences, and he coined this term scientist. He also coined the term physicist, linguistics, a number of things in identifying the history of science. And so the definition of science that has emerged and is debated continues to be a matter, like everything in the academy, of some contention. I've suggested that science is systematic inquiry into how the world works and why. Principles of science are openness to the world as it is, systematic inquiry, transparency of methods, sharing of findings for review by peers, and cumulative knowledge. We have elements of science already incorporated in evaluation. Stuart Donaldson's work in program theory-driven evaluation science is one of the first to highlight evaluation science. In that book, Stuart writes, evaluation science is intended to underscore the use of rigorous scientific methods, qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods, to attempt to answer valued evaluation questions. The term evaluation science signals the emphasis placed on the guiding principle of systematic inquiry from the guiding principles for evaluators and the critical evaluation standard of accuracy from the Joint Committee on Standards for Evaluation. Ray Pawson, in his Realist Manifesto, also talks about the science of evaluation. In Carol Weiss's important paper on theory of change, which brought that into evaluation, she viewed that work as being scientific. In his 1999 keynote address as president of the American Evaluation Association, Michael Scriven argued that evaluation is the science of valuing. And he said, there is no science without evaluation, because without evaluation, one could not distinguish science from pseudoscience, let alone good science from poor science. And distinguishing good science from bad science, for example, in work submitted for publication, graduation, course grades, or promotion, and in one's own work, is an essential part of being a competent scientist. Science is, in fact, totally dependent on evaluation for even the use of its name. Judgments of value are, in fact, highly objective elements in every scientific enterprise, every scientific publication, and every plausible version of the scientific method. And so what Scriven argued is that evaluation is transdisciplinary, meaning it's a discipline serving other sciences, like philosophy, like statistics. It is transdisciplinary, and that part of his concern was that scientists weren't getting sufficient training in evaluation to do a good job of scientific evaluation. Peer review processes are highly flawed. We see that in the rebuttals going on in these days with journal articles that have since been refuted. The tenure process is highly flawed. And so Michael Scriven wrote about the need for evaluative thinking to permeate science in a more direct way. In the International Evaluation Academies, that's been mentioned, the mission includes the scientific evaluation, promoting scientific evaluation. And the new Global Evaluation Agenda, just launched a month ago by Eval Partners, includes emphasis on evaluative thinking for the future. This affirms and recognizes that evaluative thinking is fundamental to scientific thinking. So the definitional stance, we are clearly the kind of work that we do when we're figuring out what works and doesn't work and publishing that. And the reasoning that's involved in evaluation is scientific reasoning. The nature of that inquiry is fundamental and has been discussed by leading evaluation communicators and thinkers. So, for example, Carl Sagan, who created scientific programming for public television, became a major voice and image for science, said science is a way of thinking much more than it is a body of knowledge. That mantle has been picked up by Neil deGrasse Tyson, who describes himself as a science communicator. He's director of the Hayden Planetarium at the American Museum of Natural History. And he recently said in an interview, "You've never seen me debate anybody on anything ever. My investment of time as an educator, in my judgment, is best served teaching people how to think about the world around them. Teach them how to pose a question, how to judge whether one thing is true versus another." President Obama understood this. In a speech supporting STEM programs in education, he said, "Science is more than a school subject or the periodic table or the properties of waves. It is an approach to the world, a critical way to understand and explore and engage with the world, and then have the capacity to change the world." That's what we do as evaluators. Now, there's still debates about what qualifies as science. If you look at, there are lists of scientists, great scientists, and typically at the top of that list, you will find Albert Einstein. But when Albert Einstein published his theory of special relativity and then his theory of relativity, his fellow physicists did not consider his work to be scientific. Indeed, it took a long time for Albert Einstein's work to be recognized and to win the Nobel Prize, in part because experimental physicists did not consider theoretical physicists to be science. Albert Einstein never did any empirical work. He had others test his theories, but it took a while to recognize that theoretical physics was science. And so both anti-Semitism and the debate about what is science delayed his receiving the Nobel Prize. Today, he is held up as an exemplar of what scientific thinking is about. So the scientific method is also talked about. And there are different versions of this. But in fact, because of the emphasis on scientific thinking, there is no single method that can be called the scientific method. And this was well stated by a recipient of the Nobel Prize, Percy Bridgman, who won the 1946 Nobel in physics, said in his acceptance speech, "There is no scientific method as such, but the vital feature of the science procedure has been merely to do his utmost with his mind, no holds barred." And so in rigorous evaluative thinking, we incorporate systems thinking, strategic thinking, design thinking, complexity thinking, scientific thinking, mixed methods thinking, principles-driven thinking, innovation-focused thinking, impact thinking, creativity, evidentiary thinking, deductive, inductive, abductive, and synthesis thinking. We are a complex, dynamic, multi-thinking kind of process. Likewise, then, there is no gold standard for scientific thinking. What is appropriate to the problem is what constitutes strong evaluations. Strong evaluations pose questions clearly, address them appropriately, and draw inferences commensurate with the power of the design and the availability, validity, and reliability of the data. The strength of an evaluation is not defined by a particular method. A strong study is technically adequate and useful. In short, it is high in quality. Eleanor Chilinsky, former president of AEA and the founder and director of the evaluation unit at the Government Accountability Office. And so in all of this, we are dealing with evaluation science, its definitional status, its nature of inquiry, a body of knowledge of what we know. In the interest of time, I'm not going to take you through all of or any of what I think that we know, but we know a great deal now about how the world works, what constitute effective programs, which brings us to the political stance, making common cause with other scientists in support of science. In that march for science, getting Americans to think scientifically meant that we have to be politically astute, politically sophisticated, politically skilled, politically engaged. Politics comes with the territory. We have to expect it and get good at it. We are in an era where the truth is a matter of great debate, a post-truth era. Post-truth being where objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. Truth is in danger, and evaluators as fact checkers and truth tellers are a part of this larger issue of supporting science. Economics Nobel Prize recipient Daniel Kahneman says in his work, looked at the way in which human rationality is bounded and distorted. A major barrier to appropriate interpreting scientific and evaluation findings is our bias in illogical interpretation and decision-making processes. A reliable way to make people believe in falsehoods is frequent repetition, because familiarity is not easily distinguished from truth. Authoritarian institutions and marketers have always known this fact. And so we are engaged in this fight against anti-science, anti-truth, or what Harry Frankfurt called on bullshit. We are part of that battle. Carol Weiss, in her article on the fairy godmother, making the dream of evidence-based policy come true, wrote about what evaluators can do in the face of politics. Let us all strive to improve the quality of our evaluations. First, let us try to ask the right questions, the key questions, the pregnant questions, questions that have important implications for the future of programming. Then let us use designs that are appropriate to the questions we raise, not forgetting that qualitative evaluation requires careful design as well. Let us work to hone our methodological skills, our working with people skills, our understanding of program life skills, our capacity to understand and interpret what we find. And that's how we get at truth. And so we are in the business of seeking truth to power. The most recent demonstrations in the United States have been no king demonstrations. Scientists, but not kings, are what we look for. Scientific evaluation research is a global reservoir of theory and practice, knowledge and inquiry, local and global integration of how our world works and how we can make it better for more people around the world. As we engage in this battle between facts, evidence, truth, data, reality, and thinking versus post-truth, fake news, alternative facts, make-believe, groupthink, and distortions, we are a part of the scientific world in trying to bring forward evidence to follow the science, combat misinformation, combat disinformation, and show that evaluation science matters. A report that's just come out on evidence-informed policymaking, a pathway to increasing trust in democratic institutions and boosting competitiveness, found that 44% of citizens now report low or no trust in their governments, yet trust in science remains relatively high. It explores how evidence-informed policymaking can restore democratic trust and boost competitiveness. Key insights from this 7-country EU project is that evidence use is the second most powerful driver of public trust in government. And it recommends knowledge brokers to help translate between science and policy. So I invite you to try on this notion of I am an evaluation scientist as we create a global movement going forward for evaluation science. Thank you.
So, Michael, thank you very much for this very interesting and useful presentation on the profession most of us are in or somehow related to, and I'm talking about the participants of today. So the question is that in our new textbook, so we define evaluation as science and service like psychology, medicine. So what do you think about this double character? So he is asking about, so it's an institution, I guess, which has a textbook which defines evaluation as science as well as service like psychology and medicine. So what do you think, Michael, about this double character of evaluation, if I've understood the question right?
Thank you for the question. And as I said in the introduction with the kaleidoscope, evaluation is multidimensional. Most universities, public universities, have a mission of both generating knowledge and of providing service to society and to their scientific disciplines. And so I'm not in any way suggesting that evaluation is only science or that limits our other contributions. And as an applied science, part of what we do is not generating knowledge as an end in itself, but generating scientific knowledge as a way of dealing with the problems the world faces and of helping judge what works and doesn't work. One of the tests in your organization, if you're saying that you support evaluation science, is to look at what you call evaluators. So that I made a presentation at the Centers for Disease Control shortly after the original article on evaluation science came out, and they changed the labels of their evaluation staff to call them evaluation scientists. So check out, are you describing yourselves as evaluation scientists given that mission?
This is great. Thank you very much, Michael. We have another very interesting question here, and it says, when we define evaluation as science, do we somehow mean that it cannot be an art?
Well, actually, it is very much an art, and you will find among the Nobel laureates who win prizes for science, most of them talk about the art of science as well as the rationality. So again, we don't have to shoehole evaluation into any single category. The point here is to broaden our understanding of what evaluation is, not to narrow it. It is certainly an art. Cronbach's work on 99 theses for evaluation includes a wonderful statement about every evaluation is a matter of creative design and as much art as science. There is an artistic element to being able to match an evaluation design to the nature of the problem. So we're expanding our understanding of what evaluation is, not narrowing it.
Great, thank you very much. One practical question, which is about what role can evaluators, especially emerging and early career professionals, play in advancing the idea of evaluation as science in rather complex and fluid contexts, such as evaluation in the context of fragility, conflict, and violence?
That's a great question. And I urge young and emerging evaluators to make evaluation science part of your resume, to describe yourself as a professional in evaluation science, to practice saying I'm an evaluation scientist and being prepared to explain what that is. I run into folks who, because evaluation seems to be difficult to sometimes to communicate, who are sort of shy about or hesitant about saying, well, I'm an evaluator, it's hard to explain, and we do studies to find out what works, and it's kind of hesitant. But I urge you to say and practice saying confidently and forcefully, I am a member of evaluation science. We use scientific thinking and scientific methods to get scientific conclusions about what works and doesn't work to help improve interventions in the world. Be confident about that. You are a part of a global community of people engaged in this, and we can present ourselves with pride that we are a part of creating knowledge about how to make the world a better place. And in doing that, be a part of that community that takes that position. Get comfortable with your own identity in that regard and use it.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question we have is, if evaluation is transdisciplinary, is it still useful to train in a single science? How can evaluators blend findings from different disciplines in their work, and what is the best training for them?
That's a great question. And that gets back to Scriven's notion of evaluation as transdisciplinary. We draw upon work from a variety of disciplines. We draw upon work from a variety of applied professions. And so the synthesis of knowledge from different fields is one of the contributions of evaluation. I think that the way you learn to do that is by learning it. There's not some set of steps that you can go through to do synthesis evaluation. What you end up having to do is to learn it by practicing it, to look for knowledge from different disciplines. So for example, utilization-focused evaluation has a research base that comes out of translational science, out of extension work that's trying to get farmers to adopt practices, out of communications work, out of psychology, that people are more likely to use something if they are part of it and understand it. Utilization-focused evaluation draws upon political science, economics, psychology, management, extension, all of these areas to make a an approach to doing useful evaluation. We do the same thing then when we study an issue. Policymakers famously have said, and legislators say, universities have departments, the world has problems, and they often don't match up. So we need to be transdisciplinary, not just interdisciplinary, but transdisciplinary, working across disciplines to pull together knowledge about what works and methods about what works.
So one more question is, Michael, how do you explain evaluation to those who need it but don't know or misunderstand it, given all the complex terms and ideals?
And I'm interacting with people. I want to begin by finding out how they view things, rather than trying to tell them how they ought to view things, so that people are inherently evaluators. They're just not systematic or rigorous evaluators. So I'm located in the state of Minnesota, where the last glacier melted, and there are lots of lakes and rivers. The Mississippi River originates here. The Great Lakes are at the top of Minnesota. They have 20% of the world's fresh water. The state motto is the land of 10,000 lakes. And so 87% of the Minnesota population goes fishing at least once a year. When I'm talking with people about what they do, and I'm going to talk to them about what I do, or I'm doing workshops in Minnesota, I don't begin by talking about evaluation. I begin by talking about fishing. How's the fishing? What did you fish for? What did you catch? Where do you fish? What kind of fishing do you do? Who do you fish with? And basically then say, I'm an evaluator, and everything that I do is in fishing. What constitutes a good day fishing? Is it the number of fish? Is it the type of fish? Is it who you're fishing with? People spend $20,000 and $30,000 on fishing equipment to catch something that costs $20 a pound in the supermarket. What's the cost benefit issue there? And so whether somebody's into sports or gardening or art, I want to find out what they're involved in and help them see that that activity, whatever it is, involves evaluation, and that what we've done as a science is make that systematic, make it rigorous, make it consistent to increase the credibility of the findings. But you communicate with people about the nature of evaluation by connecting with their world and extending it and expanding it rather than beginning with our world.
Right. One more question we have, Michael, is how can we best bring qualitative and responsive evaluation methods into the scientific realm of evaluation?
Another great question. And what I learned from debating in the qualitative, quantitative years of debate, nowadays in the gold standard debate and in the utilization debates, is that it's not all that helpful to debate these things in the abstract, that the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. When you show people good examples of qualitative work, when you show them exemplars of culturally responsive work, the examples stand on their own. I'm working with Nikki Bowman on using indigenous evaluation in some work around climate change and sustainability. And the quality of the work and the example is what carries the day, not an abstract argument about how to go about doing this, but having solid examples that you can show people what this means.
Does all evaluation qualify as science or only certain approaches? For example, theory-driven, empirical, replicable, quantitative?
The issue of labeling an evaluation science is really the audience that you're speaking to and how you want to frame it for intended use. So as I suggested with the kaleidoscope, there's accountability forms of evaluation and auditing forms that are about control and management. There are approaches to evaluation that are about dialogue and learning. And so the scientific part of this is where, in fact, you are dealing in a context where science is valued, where it is part of what people understand to be credible and meaningful information. And where that fits, if you're in dealing with universities, think tanks, senior legislators, policymakers, government institutions that value science, then framing evaluation work as a part of science is a way to communicate and add to the credibility. There are other forms of doing evaluation, including bad evaluation. And so knowing the difference between good and bad is part of what treating evaluation as a transdiscipline is. There's all kinds of judgments being made. The issue is what their evidence are based on and how the connection between that judgment and evidence unfolds. That's evaluative thinking. That's the ultimate test of scientific thinking, is that we're doing rigorous evaluative thinking. Rigor doesn't reside in methods, it resides in thinking.
Is how do we balance presenting evaluation as a science? Will all the implications of training and expertise and specialism with approaches to evaluation that are more inclusive and recognize the value of contribution from all and distribution of power through evaluation, more equitable evaluation, so it doesn't feel us and them or us versus them? That's a very interesting question.
Thank you, Hertz. A great closing question. And all of life is about finding balance. And so there are competing interests, there are competing needs. As a consultant, one of the things that consultants jokingly will say to clients, there are 3 qualities that you're looking for: fast, cheap, and good. You can have any 2. Fast, cheap, and good. You can have any 2. There are interactions, conflicts, synergies among those different directions. And any given context is about negotiating that balance of which particular qualities and criteria are going to be ascendant in that setting. The thing to do, the way I think to manage that balance, is to get explicit about what those alternative criteria are. What are the criteria of being culturally responsive? What are the criteria of being scientifically credible? What are the criteria of being useful? And that you make explicit so that it's not fuzzy and murky, but you're quite explicit about what the criteria are and negotiating with intended users how much emphasis and ways of emphasizing and spotlighting and integrating those different criteria. Fast, cheap, and good. You can have any 2.
Michael, there is a question on AI. I know we are already 3 minutes over, but do you have a couple of minutes to answer this one as well? Because I think it looks very interesting.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, but I promise this is the last one. Okay, so the question is, there are expectations among experts that within around 6 years, we will have artificial or super intelligence. AI will know more than all of the humanity together. It is already taking over a huge amount of research, scientific studies, and it is likely that likely just a matter of time before it can ask questions and innovate as much as best scientists in the world. How do you see the future of science and by implication of evaluation as science within this emerging situation?
It certainly is about our future, about everyone's future. The new Global Evaluation Agenda 2.0 that was just launched has a major section on shaping AI for evaluation. And I would refer people to that. If you do a search with Eval Partners for Eval Agenda 2.0, there's a great discussion there. And the mantra there is to shape AI, not to be shaped by AI, but to shape AI for use in evaluation. And to part of our responsibility is going to be to track how AI is used. What we can be sure of is that there will be misuses, there will be inappropriate uses, there will be partial uses, and there will be some exemplary uses. Part of what we need to be doing is helping people make those distinctions so that they can bring evaluative thinking and judgment to AI.
I will be very brief. So I would like to thank everybody, and in particular, of course, Michael Quinn Patton for not only his very challenging and interesting presentation, but also the way he answered the different questions. This was very, very interesting. It was worth being there, I would say. And thank you. Thanks to all. Over to you, Hugo.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Michael, once again for all of us. And have a good rest of your day wherever you are in your in the world.